"You're absolutely insane if you think Trump can win," my financial advisor said when I told him my plan. It was March 2016, and I wanted to put my entire life savings $250 on what everyone considered the most unlikely political outcome. In American history, the odds were 5-1 against Trump. The experts were laughing. The polls showed Hillary winning by double digits, but I saw something no one else did, and that vision turned my $250,000 into $10 million in a single night. This isn't a political story. This is a story about seeing opportunity where everyone else sees impossibility, and having the courage to bet everything when the entire world tells you you're wrong. My name is David, and in March 2016, I was a 42-year-old financial analyst, living in suburban Ohio with my wife and 2 teenage kids. I wasn't rich, but I wasn't poor either. 20 years of steady work, careful saving, and conservative investments had built our family nest egg to exactly $247,000. Not enough to retire on, but enough to feel secure about the kids' college funds and our future. I worked for a mid-investment firm, analyzing market trends and helping clients make informed decisions about their portfolios. I was good at my job, but I wasn't what you'd call a high roller. My colleagues often joked that I was the most conservative investor in the office, the guy who preached diversification and never met a blue-chip stock he didn't like. That reputation made what happened next even more shocking to everyone who knew me. It started with something I noticed that everyone else seemed to be missing. In early 2016, while the media was treating Trump's presidential campaign like a reality TV sideshow, I was looking at the data differently. My job required me to analyze economic trends, demographic shifts, and market indicators, and what I was seeing in the numbers didn't match what I was hearing on the news. The Rust Belt was showing signs of economic frustration that the national media wasn't capturing. Manufacturing job losses, wage stagnation, and a growing distrust of traditional politicians were creating conditions that historically led to major political upheavals. More importantly, I was tracking betting markets and options pricing that suggested the smart money wasn't as confident about Hillary's inevitable victory as they claimed to be. The discrepancy between public polling and private betting patterns reminded me of the 2008 financial crisis, when everyone said the housing market was solid right up until it collapsed. I started to suspect that 2016 might be another one of those moments when conventional wisdom gets blindsided by reality. But having a theory and acting on it are two very different things. Over the next 2 months, I dove deeper into the data than I'd ever gone for any investment analysis. I studied county-by-county voting patterns from previous elections. I analyzed demographic trends in swing states. I researched the historical correlation between economic anxiety and political outsider success. Most importantly, I started tracking the options markets around election outcomes. What I found was fascinating. While the polls showed Hillary with a commanding lead, the options pricing suggested much more uncertainty. Someone was betting serious money on a Trump victory, even when the mainstream consensus said it was impossible. The more I researched, the more convinced I became that the experts were missing something huge. But I wasn't just thinking about who would win. I was thinking about what would happen to the markets if Trump won. Here's what most people didn't understand about the 2016 election. It wasn't just about who would be president. It was about which direction the entire American economy would move. A Trump victory would likely mean massive deregulation, corporate tax cuts, infrastructure spending, and a completely different approach to trade policy. These changes would create winners and losers across different sectors of the economy if Trump won. Certain industries would explode overnight. Defense contractors, traditional energy companies, construction firms, financial services companies that had been held back by post-2008 regulations. But here's the key: because everyone thought Trump couldn't win, these sectors were severely undervalued. The market had priced in a Hillary victory, which meant Trump-friendly stocks were trading at huge discounts. I realized that if I was right about Trump's chances, I could make a fortune not just by betting on his victory, but by positioning myself in the market sectors that would benefit most from his policies. That's when I started developing what would become the most important investment strategy of my life. First, I would buy call options on specific stocks and sectors that would benefit from Trump policies. Caterpillar Infrastructure, Lockheed Martin Defense, JP Morgan Chase, financial deregulation, and ExxonMobil energy deregulation. Call options would give me massive leverage. If these stocks jumped after a Trump victory, my returns would be multiplied by 10 or 20 times my initial investment. Second, I would short some technology stocks and renewable energy companies that might suffer under Trump's policies. Third, would make a direct bet on Trump's victory through offshore betting markets, where I could get 5-to-1 odds. The total investment, $250,000. Every dollar our family had saved over 20 years. If I was wrong, we'd lose everything. If I was right, we'd be set for life. When I tried to explain my plan to my financial advisor, Marcus, his reaction was immediate and brutal. "David, I've known you for 8 years. You're one of the most rational, data-driven investors I work with. But this is gambling. not investing. The data supports it, I insisted, showing him my research. The data, he laughed. David, every reputable poll shows Trump losing by double digits. 538 gives him a 15% chance. The betting markets you're citing are driven by wishful thinking from his supporters, not actual analysis. What if the polls are wrong? They're not wrong. And even if they were, you're talking about risking your family's entire financial future on a political bet. This isn't analysis, it's madness. But Marcus was just the beginning. When I told my wife Karen about the plan, her reaction was even stronger. Absolutely not, she said. I will not let you gamble away our children's college funds on Donald Trump. It's not gambling if it's based on research, David. Listen to yourself. You want to bet our life savings on the idea that every expert in America is wrong about the election. Do you understand how crazy that sounds? The conversation escalated quickly. Karen threatened to move the money to an account I couldn't access. She called my brother and asked him to talk sense into me. She even suggested I see a therapist about what she called my midlife crisis political obsession. But the final blow came from my own industry colleagues. Word of my plan somehow leaked around the office, and my colleagues decided to stage what they called an intervention. 7 experienced financial professionals sat me down in a conference room and took turns explaining why I was about to destroy my life. David, said Jennifer, our senior portfolio manager, I've been doing this for 25 years. I've seen smart people make catastrophic decisions based on political emotions. Don't be one of them. This isn't emotion, I said. It's analysis. It's confirmation bias, said Tom, our chief economist. You've convinced yourself that you see something no one else sees, but you're just seeing what you want to see. The fundamentals don't support a Trump victory, added Lisa. The demographics are against him. The electoral math is impossible. You're betting against every legitimate analyst in the country. One by one, they presented their arguments. Historical precedent, polling methodology, economic indicators, demographic trends, electoral college mathematics. They were right about everything, except the one thing that mattered. But by the end of that meeting, I was more convinced than ever that I had to make this bet. In September 2016, despite every objection from the person I trusted, I liquidated our family's entire investment portfolio, $247,000 in cash, sitting in my trading account, ready to be deployed. I spent 2 weeks carefully placing my trades, $75,000 in call options on Caterpillar, Lockheed Martin, and JP Morgan Chase, $50,000 shorting renewable energy ETFs and tech stocks I thought would suffer, $25,000 in currency options betting on a stronger dollar, $97,000 on offshore betting sites. Placing direct wagers on Trump's victory at 5-to-1 odds. Trade felt like stepping off a cliff. Karen stopped speaking to me. My advisor refused to take my calls. My colleagues looked at me like I'd lost my mind. But as election day approached, something interesting started happening. By October, I started seeing cracks in the consensus narrative. The betting odds began tightening. Not dramatically, but enough to suggest that serious money was starting to consider a Trump victory possible. More importantly, I was tracking early voting patterns and voter registration data that didn't match the polling. Demographics. The mainstream media wasn't reporting it, but there were signs of higher than expected Republican turnout in key swing states and lower than expected Democratic enthusiasm in urban areas. I also noticed that some of the stocks I'd bet on were starting to move upward slightly, as if institutional investors were quietly positioning themselves for a possible Trump victory. But even with these encouraging signs, I was terrified. $250,000 represented 20 years of our lives. If I was wrong, I wouldn't just lose money, I'd lose my family's trust, my career credibility, and any chance of recovering financially before retirement. The night before the election, I barely slept. November 8, 2016. Karen and I had planned to watch the results together. But the tension in our house was so thick that she decided to go to her sister's instead. I sat alone in my home office, with 3 monitors displaying election results, market futures, and my trading accounts. At 7 p.m. Eastern, when the first polls closed, the futures markets were already pricing in a Hillary victory. My positions were underwater, and I was down about $40,000 within the first hour. By 9 p.m., when Pennsylvania's results started coming in unexpectedly close, the futures began to swing wildly. By 10 p.m., when Wisconsin looked competitive, my phone started buzzing with trading notifications. By 11 p.m., when it became clear that Trump was actually going to win, the financial world went absolutely insane. The Dow futures dropped 800 points in after-hours trading, then reversed and shot up 300 points as investors realized what Trump's policies would mean for business. But the real explosion happened when the markets opened the next morning. November 9, 2016, 9:30 a.m. Eastern Time, when the markets opened, the morning after Trump's victory. My trading account experienced what I can only describe as a controlled explosion. Caterpillar opened up 7%. Lockheed Martin jumped 6%. JP Morgan Chase soared 5% in the first 10 minutes of trading my call options, which had given me 22-1 leverage on these moves, multiplied my gains exponentially. The renewable energy shorts I'd placed paid off as those stocks plummeted on fears of reduced government support. The currency trades profited as the dollar strengthened on expectations of higher interest rates and economic growth. But the biggest wins came from the direct betting market wagers at 5-to-1 odds. By the end of the first trading day, my account balance showed a number I had to check 3 times to believe. $10,247,000, $247,000. I had turned $250,000 into over $10 million in less than 24 hours. Asterisk, the first call I made was to Karen. How much did we lose? She asked, her voice resigned. We didn't lose anything. David, please, just tell me the number, I can handle it. Karen, we made $10 million. Silence, that's not funny. I'm not joking. Check your email. I'm sending you a screenshot of the account. 5 minutes later, she called back, crying. The second call was to Marcus, my financial advisor. David, I owe you the biggest apology of my career, he said. I've been in this business for 20 years, and I've never seen anyone make a call like that. You weren't wrong to be skeptical, I told him. You were protecting your client, but sometimes the biggest opportunities come disguised as the biggest risks. The third call was to my office. I'd like to submit my resignation, I told my boss. Because of the election results. No, because I don't need to work anymore. Asterisk, people ask me all the time how I knew Trump would win when every expert said it was impossible. The truth is, I didn't know. No one could have known for certain. But I recognized a pattern that others missed. The gap between public narrative and private reality. When conventional wisdom becomes too conventional. When everyone agrees on something. When the experts stop questioning their assumptions. That's when opportunities emerge for people willing to think differently. I also learned something about risk that changed my entire approach to investing. The biggest risk isn't losing money on a bad bet. The biggest risk is missing life-changing opportunities because you're too afraid to bet on your convictions. Most people thought I was risking everything on Trump's election, but I wasn't betting on Trump, I was betting on my analysis, my research, and my ability to see patterns that others were missing. The election was just the catalyst. The real opportunity was recognizing how dramatically the markets had mispriced the probability of change. Asterisk. That $10 million didn't just change our bank account, it changed everything about how we lived. We paid off our mortgage immediately. We set up college funds for both kids that would cover any school they wanted to attend. We bought a new house, took the family on vacations we'd only dreamed about, and started a foundation to help other families achieve financial independence. But the most important change was psychological. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't worried about money. I could take risks, pursue opportunities, and make decisions based on potential upside rather than fear of downside. I started my own investment firm, specializing in contrarian bets and market inefficiencies. The Trump election trade became my calling card. But it also taught me principles that I've applied to dozens of successful investments since then. Karen, who had been so opposed to the original bet, became my biggest supporter and eventually my business partner. I learned something too, she told me recently. I learned the difference between gambling and calculated risk-taking. What you did wasn't crazy, it was just so far outside normal thinking that it looked crazy. Asterisk. The 2016 election taught me that the biggest fortunes are made by people who can see change coming before everyone else recognizes it. Whether it's technological disruption, political upheaval, or economic transformation. The investors who profit most are the ones willing to bet against conventional wisdom when their analysis tells them the consensus is wrong. Trump's victory wasn't just a political event, it was a reminder that in a rapidly changing world, yesterday's certainties can become tomorrow's surprises. The experts weren't wrong because they were stupid. They were wrong because they were thinking inside a system that was about to change. My $250,000 bet on Trump's election wasn't really about politics. It was about recognizing that sometimes the most impossible outcomes are just the most improbable ones that haven't happened yet. In investing, as in life, the biggest rewards go to people who can think independently, research thoroughly, and have the courage to act on their convictions when everyone else thinks they're crazy. Sometimes being called insane is just the price you pay for being early, and sometimes being early is worth $10 million. Asterisk. Have you ever made a contrarian investment that everyone said was crazy? Have you spotted an opportunity that others missed? Share your story in the comments. Sometimes the best investments are the ones that make no sense to anyone but you. Asterisk.